Good morning, everybody. I first want to say thank you. I feel humbled to be here and present during this momentous occasion. I attended the dinner last night and listened to the speeches, and I really feel privileged to be part of this event, so thank you for having me. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how I believe design can help us build a better food future. And when you think about redesigning our food system, it's hard to imagine where you'd even begin. Our food system, our global food system, is so complex and broken in so many ways. There is a basic lack of respect for our natural resources, such as land and water. We're faced with hunger and malnutrition in some of our most developed countries. Obesity rates are growing across the globe. We're wasting close to a third of the food that we produce each year. We're squeezing cost out of the supply chain, and we're devaluing and underpaying the farmers who grow the food that we eat. And we're overpackaging food that contributes to oceans full of plastic. The list goes on. And you heard the children this morning, they mentioned many of these things. They know that this is happening. So if you were to think about redesigning our food system, where would you even begin? It's no wonder that we're feeling paralyzed and somewhat helpless to face these challenges. They're huge. But if we designed ourselves into this current situation, surely that means we can use design to help ourselves get out of it. When faced with a challenge of this scale, design may not be the first tool in your toolkit that you'd turn to. But at IDEO, we believe in the power of design to help us solve large-scale, complex, systemic challenges, whether that be redesigning education systems, redesigning social justice, to redesigning the fragmentation of our food system. We believe we can use the power of design to drive sustainable change in the food system, and we can also use design to enable individuals, organizations, and society to improve their food behaviors for the better. Today, I'm going to highlight some of the shifts that I think we need to see in food to enable us to address some of these things and take on some of the issues that we're faced with in food. And I'm also going to share 3 ways that I think design can help us build a better food future. The first shift is bring your emotions to work. Obviously, we had the children speaking this morning. That was pretty emotional. The speeches last night, they were very emotional. But typically, there is the sense that business and emotions don't mix, and that you should check your emotions at the door. However, we've noticed how impactful it can be when emotions are allowed to drive decisions inside your organization. In many cases, it's the lack of emotional connection between consumers and big food companies that causes some of the problems today. Once you immerse yourself deeply in the needs of consumers, you understand their needs and you hear where they're coming from, it's easier to make decisions around what's the best thing for them. And quite honestly, it's easier to tap into your moral compass and if you feel things more on a visceral level. So on a recent project to look at the future of water, we wanted our client to more seriously understand what the world would look like if we didn't have a limitless supply of water. Not so hard to imagine with some of the crumbling infrastructures and water shortages hitting cities such as Cape Town and Rome, but hard to truly feel on a personal level, and that oftentimes stays in the realm of somebody else's problem. So we took our team to meet David. We've changed David's name and his physical identity for the sake of his privacy. David lives in California. He lives in the East Bay near San Francisco. Let's meet him.
Started with a plumbing problem, which it was causing a massive leakage through some of the pipes in the faucet. Eventually I just had to decide, if you turn it off, I've gotten adapted to using lesser amounts of water. Buy bottled water every day or two, by a gallon or two or something like that. I'm sort of a hobbyist cook. I try to take shortcuts as far as the use of water, whereas when you watch these shows, I watch ATK, I call it ATK, which is American Test Kitchen. I watch them. Their use of water is an ideal situation. I wouldn't say it's exactly an ideal situation because it's not exactly a luxury, it's a necessity.
So David told us that having running water would be an ideal situation, but he's not living in an ideal. His water pipes are broken. He can't afford to fix them. He's living without water. So our client cried after she met David. Before she met him, she honestly couldn't contextualize a situation like this, and she couldn't imagine how an individual would be living in these conditions. By introducing her to David, we brought an imminent water crisis to life in a way that she could feel on a personal level. When she returned to her organization, she fought like never before to bring ideas to life that took more responsibility for the infrastructural elements of a water system, as opposed to just building another product idea and putting it on shelf. By bringing her emotions to work, our client was able to imagine a life without future and to imagine the role that her organization should be playing in that future, for her then also to become an advocate for that. The next shift is about taking a more systemic approach to innovation. And this is really in order to help us get ahead of some of the technological, cultural, and societal shifts that are coming our way. With these shifts, it's very possible that we'll have to rethink our approach to growth. And we'll have to think about what the new realities of a food system are going to look like in that future. Starting in the 1980s and expanding in today, most of the successful food companies have expanded their brands and grown through geographical expansion. But a lot of those countries have either started to fight back with their own local brands, or the markets are just becoming saturated. With growth more difficult to come by, the next logical way to go is through mergers and acquisitions. And following that, the next logical way to grow is through building your own innovation capabilities. However, if you think about building those innovation capabilities, the problems that we'll be faced with in the future are going to look very different than the problems that we're faced with today. And therefore, will require us to have new tools to approach innovation, and we'll have to take a more systemic approach to it. In addition to this, there is a ceiling for how much an industry can concentrate itself to grow. And antitrust laws are inevitable. As electricity solutions become more and more efficient, the food industry will become the leading cause of pollution. And there will be regulations put in place to address this. In addition to this, the UN projects there are 60 harvests remaining with the current topsoil practices. And the cost of ingredients will start to increase as less and less land is available. So with shifts like this, it's going to force us to rethink innovation to be less about the product and more about the system surrounding the product. It's going to be more about your partners and your suppliers' innovation pipeline, as well as your own innovation pipeline. And the need to take a longer view will be more and more greater. For a project with IKEA a few years ago, we were asked with thinking about taking a longer view and what the kitchen of the future would look like in 2025. We were tasked to think about what the system would look like surrounding it, and what some of those societal and cultural and technological shifts might be, and how they would impact that space. Instead of taking on the entire system, IKEA chose to narrow in on a specific room in the home and started to think about how those technological, cultural, and societal shifts would impact that specific space and the people's lives within it. We didn't start by designing the refrigerator or the stove. We designed with a completely new reality in mind, one that actually would be driven by many things that would be outside of IKEA's control. More people are moving into cities, and our living spaces are becoming smaller and smaller. Natural resources are becoming more scarce, and food is becoming increasingly expensive. Waste is becoming an increasingly urgent issue. Near-instant grocery delivery, as Mike mentioned, is changing how we store and shop for food. And technology is embedded in pretty much every part of our home. With all of these things in mind, some of the concepts we developed for the kitchen were the modern pantry, which uses induction cooling and encourages us to have a closer relationship with food by storing it outside in transparent containers instead of hiding it in the back of the fridge where we forget about our food and it goes away to die. The mindful sink, which encourages us to be more conscious around how we use water and how we're going to consume that water. It helps us choose between black water and grey water that can be used elsewhere in the home. The thoughtful disposal, which also encourages us to be more conscious around waste and where we're putting our waste. And the table for living, which is really designed to inspire people to be more creative with food and to throw away less. Despite the fact that this kitchen concept was designed for the year 2050, IKEA didn't sit around and wait for that future to come. They started working backwards from that timeline and started to think about what some of the cultural and technological and societal shifts were and how they could think about those to apply to near-term ideas. Because of this, a lot of the ideas that they've launched very recently are driven by systemic approaches to innovation and start to take some of these shifts into account. In addition to this, IKEA wanted to make this vision very public. So they weren't overly concerned about IP. They really wanted to make this public and open source to everybody. And their thinking was that by doing so, they would inspire their partners and their product developers to think longer term, as well as thinking about how it might impact the overall system, as opposed to just their little piece of it. By taking a systemic approach to innovation, IKEA was able to lead the way, to future-proof themselves and turn challenges into opportunities. The final shift I'd like to suggest is to collaborate with your competitors. So through our work, we've noticed that large organizations are often siloed inside those organizations. It's oftentimes hard to collaborate between the different functions. But beyond that, IP drives so many decisions that it's hard to ever imagine collaborating with your competitors. But a lot of the issues we're faced with in food right now are not the responsibility of a single organization. They're complex, they're nuanced, and they're systemic. And they have to be addressed at the ecosystem level in order to affect real change. In our work, we've been using design to build new shared futures that move the conversation from an abstract place into something much more tangible that can be shared and acted upon collaboratively. Collab is our platform for collaborative impact. Last year, we hosted our first Circular Economy of Food Collab. It was an effort that brought together multiple stakeholders in the world of food to think about how we might design waste out of all aspects of the supply chain. We hosted a 3-day sprint, and we brought together all of those competitors to work on some of the biggest issues that we're facing in food. I'm excited to say that Danone was the first member to join our Circular Economy of Food Collab. Danone took that first leap of faith, and it then inspired 6 other members to join the collab. I'm going to share a short video that captures the event.
We're here to take a very audacious but also very intangible concept of circular economy. We're trying to take that to the next level and actually make it much more tangible and concrete.
It has been an extraordinary week. We have all of these extraordinary member companies that are here really looking at how we can be re-envisioning the food system and applying circular principles to a regenerative future.
Circularity is so closely linked with innovation, and it's innovation that's the path forward for us as we face really daunting challenges in every aspect of our economy.
The huge light bulb was the build a prototype. It generates so much more positive feedback than just an idea which generally gets crushed or naysaying.
Traditionally, talking is so much easier. It's easier to sit around the table, and we found ourselves doing that at several points. And so breaking out of that and actually starting to build was kind of a revelatory moment for all of us.
The experience has been really intense and really energizing, and I think really eye-opening, and it sounds a bit like a cliche maybe to say that, but I think that the fact that so many of us spend a lot of our time thinking through these systemic problems, but we do so in our own companies or in our own organizations, and I think the beauty of this is that we're coming together with different companies, different participants, different skill sets to together co-create basically a solution. I think there are very few and special opportunities that you can have to do that.
And so that's what's really most exciting for me, is to be able to work with, potential competitors in this space, and instead of competitors, it's peers. And that shift has really been kind of foundational for me.
So over the course of 3 days, the teams created prototypes that spanned circular food delivery to new ways of handling trash, circular food packaging, and circular ways for companies to source ingredients, just to name a few. Remember, these concepts were created by competitors working together in tandem, not apart. But the prototypes really were just the beginning. They offered something to react to. They offered a concrete place for a conversation to start. And they offered something that could be developed further between the partner companies. Some of these concepts have been taken on by Danone and other partners for further testing and development. So by collaborating with competitors, our members were able to start taking tangible steps towards a shared future. So in summary, some of the shifts that I think need to happen for us to see real change in food. Bring your emotions to work. Human-centered design will enable you to connect with consumers and drive your business financially, emotionally, and morally. Take a systemic approach to innovation. Use the power of design to create tangible future visions that can become beacons of change that help you drive towards that new future inside your organization. And then finally, collaborate with your competitors. The design process can break down walls, bring people together to collaborate on issues that sit beyond the walls of a single organization. The food system is honestly ripe for innovation, and it desperately needs our help. So if we can all start to adopt some of these shifts in our lives and work, I'm sure it will enable us to create a better food future together. Thank you.